Mr. Jerald Cooper. Coop,
Hey,
welcome to the
thank you so
Institute of
much.
Black Imagination. So excited to have you here, man.
Thank you so much. I love your headphones too, man.
Ah, thank you, thank you. These are
This is a
Master and
massive dynamic.
Dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my guy. Those are my
yeah.
guys over there.
I have to shout them out. They were the first to believe in this podcast, and so they actually sent us headphones for our
That's
monitoring
dope. That's
headphones. So
dope. Is that John is right? John is the founder.
I think
Uh,
so. I speak
yeah.
with Vicky, who's one of the vice
Okay.
president there.
Okay. Yeah, I've been real cool. I think his name is John. I love the headphones and the intentionality around them. Yeah, I really like them.
Yeah, super beautiful.
Yeah.
So to start, who would you like to dedicate today's conversation to?
Oh, that's really cool. I want to shout out I want to dedicate it to my mother and my father.
Yeah, what are their
Yeah.
names?
Jackie and Joyce Cooper.
All right,
Yeah.
Jackie and Joyce.
Yeah. So there's a male Jackie and then there's a Joyce. Yeah.
Okay, dope,
Ain't
dope,
that
dope.
cool? Yeah.
So like, what's exciting you right now?
Wow, man, I'm just so excitable, D. I'm so excitable. I mean, the smallest things from Spanish, like I'm learning Spanish, and so I am interacting in this in a world that is now feels sort of double, essentially, when you learn another language or learn a new language. And so that's really excited me. I never, when I was 16 learning Spanish, it was like dreadful. You know what I'm saying? And now not only is it obviously useful, but it just seems like an adventure and a fun, this way. When you learn something, when you go the wrong way and then you finally find home and then that one street connects you, be like, yo, I didn't even know this street would connect me to this. It's just like that learning a new language, right? And so Spanish and language learning has just really been exciting to me lately.
Yeah, actually, that's actually a really good jumping off point because I think, what you're doing at Hood Mid-Century Modern is the kind of creation and reifying of a lexicon or a vocabulary around how we understand the world around us, and it's like it's hidden in plain sight in a way, but by being able to name the thing, then you're actually able to see the thing. And so, what is Hood Mid-Century Modern?
I mean, you said it started that seeing part is really dynamic from us, but I basically um I was walking up my mom's street in late 2019, and when I got up to the top of the hill, it was actually on Ho's birthday, December 4th, I think. I got to the top of the hill, and there's these residential mid-century modern homes at the top of my street in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was like, yo, my niggas don't know that. My niggas don't know that this is mid-century modern. Like, my boys don't know this. My people keep talking, on one side, and this is how I think. On one side, everybody's talking about the neighborhood now. At every dinner, it's this is happening in my neighborhood. This is happening. This sheer disgust at dinner. But then, you match that with the lack of knowledge about the neighborhood on a civic level, on any of your levels, because it's a lifestyle of knowing in the neighborhood, right? Whose lawn's the best, right? Who works where? Certain things, but the knowing about this thing that keeps moving and what I keep calling the most valuable asset in the neighborhood, because, financially and factually, the house is the most valuable asset in these neighborhoods. And we just don't know about them. And we know why we don't know about them, D. Because that's when I get into conversations, people be like, well, you don't know it because of this. Dude, I know we know that part. But I'm thinking, I was thinking at that moment when I created Hood Mid-Century is how can I add to the solution? I'm fronting. I wanted to basically show my boys, show my people. And in showing them, and in having this conversation, and then in being a cynic, just kind of a funny guy that turned into a cynic, I was like, yo, I love having a solution to certain problems. I'm going to admit it. And this was one of them. It's like, let's give it a name. And in the spirit world, and all of our spirit homies who are listening to this, we know giving something a name creates it, right? Like, right? We know that from the Alcoholics Anonymous, and we know that from any healing principles that we've, or any healing stuff that we went through. So I love to take spirit world D into it. And so knowing, all right, Hood Mid-Century is like, all right, I'm just going to see it now. And so from there, from that, like bringing that out on Instagram on my personal, I started an account, and I was mimicking Hood Mid-Century Modern. At first it started saying Hood Mid-Century Homes, because essentially I was mimicking from like, the Anglo kind of mid-century modern homes. And I would just put hood, shouts out to Hood by Air, shouts out to the actual, all these sort of ways that we, bring our culture into the conversation. And so it began with that intention. But now it's a multidimensional realization of where you're at.
And, I can only imagine that came from a place of maybe not understanding where you were, not having a legibility like around your environment. And so like, let's double tap on that a little bit. Like you're in Ohio right now, right? Like Cincinnati, which is where you grew up. Like what was that space like, right? Like what was that space for you as a young Black man that kind of prepared you or maybe even set you up for like where you are right now? Like what were you seeing?
I mean, this is really, I'm so excited about this question because this is the insane part. Right now I'm facing south. I'm on the Ohio River, which means I'm at Kentucky, right? I'm at the south. And people never really, like, I'm literally less than 2 miles from the south right now. But I could see the hills of northern Kentucky right now as I'm talking to you. But people don't understand that with this location in Cincinnati all the time, and its location to America's South and the passageway of that. And even in the native land, to the right of me is one of the most majestic, and sometimes from the it's so weird that I'm forgetting this amazing tribe's name, but the Shawnee. So the Shawnee, when they came from the New York area, that region, in the early 1700s, late 1600s, they came here and they called this area and this river to the right of me, which is now a train track, the most spiritual and sacred place in their native world. Okay, so that's like where I am, and this Ohio Valley is crazy. The valley of this area actually gives New York its weather, essentially, right? Because of the way that the air moves from the Arctic, which is just in our river, these waters that are atop of my state. Which these waters that are atop of my state are also like some of the world's, if not one of the world's biggest, fresh bodies of water, and we call fresh bodies of water like source energy. You see what I'm saying? These shores have in Cincinnati have Toni Morrison, I think, wrote about them the most real and best and beloved when we talk about this passage to freedom, and just beyond freedom is Cincinnati, and just sort of in this horrid, it's just northern Kentucky, is somewhere that I visit every day. And so I'm from a neighborhood called College Hill, which has a really stark, historically abolitionist community. The start of the Underground Railroad was in my city. And so the Underground Railroad president was from my neighborhood. And 50 miles southeast of us is Uncle Tom's Cabin. So my region is just so energetically, lush. And I knew that a little bit, but that 2020 bug. I went back home. I was living in London, Los Angeles, and New York. And I've been living in New York on and off since I was 17. And so, trying to escape this region, right? Trying to get out and see the world. And being so interested in everything, I'd always, spew the facts about where I was from, but I got a much more deeper knowledge when I came back in 2020. Dude.
Yeah, and kind of we spoke about Jackie and Joyce. Talk to us a little bit about your parents and like some of the lessons that
Yeah,
they like instilled in you, right? That shaped this point of view.
yeah, that's dope. So Jackie, my father was born in 1937 here in the West End, where I'm sitting right now. And his life is just so gnarly because the Cincinnati Reds, the first Major League Baseball team here in America, they play where I'm sitting right now, and the old Crosley Field. And sorry, the lawnmower is here. Yo, B, turn it down, but sorry. Uh, so my dad grows up in the West End, considered one of the poorest places to live in the turn of the century, and public housing starts in this neighborhood essentially in America. So we have CMHA is like one of the oldest like housing authorities and the oldest housing authority in America, and my dad was like a product of it, right? So I could actually sort of like take my dad's life and like as I'm reading the city planning books and kind of like trace. And like when you get your first home, you get it in one of these neighborhoods. And I'm like, yep, that's true, And then my mom was also a product of that, and her mother and my father's mother came from Georgia and Alabama, respectively. And so that's like where my lineage, is and goes. And then my father passed away about 4 years ago, and my mom lives in our childhood home in College Hill right now. She's been there about 40 years. And they both, it's interesting, right? Like they both work for the state. One worked for the city, one worked for the state. My dad worked in the mental health hospital here. And before physical therapy was a degree, it was a training. I don't know if you remember that. It was just a training at first. You get trained and so he got trained in athletic therapy, which was sort of like a PE teacher essentially would get trained in some of the same thing. And then you would go up to like training and more medicine, and he just chose to keep that and start working for the state in their athletics. So basically, making sure that the patients at this mental health hospital were active and doing things, baseball games, setting up, like just being kind of like a PE teacher. It's really cool. And then my mom worked at our metro, our bus system, in the disabled transportation, which we call access. And so I, kind of, in both ways, they worked in the mental health space in some way, shape, or form. And I never kind of considered that. And I don't even know if they sought out to do that. But surely, like, I grew up, like, in the, like, hanging with people around that had multiple spectrums of how they understood and spoke and interacted, So those are my fondest memories of my mom and dad, like their professions and how that bled into like our lifestyle of being personable and being able to interact in many different ways with human beings,
And so it's interesting, right? Like you're really like the scion of the Great Migration, right? Like you are literally on like looking at the border in a sense, right?
Yeah.
But you have these two parents, one working for the state, one working for the city, and they have this little black boy named Jerald. And they throw you in Montessori school. Like, what was the rationale behind that? And like, how did that shape, like, actually explain to us a little bit about like Montessori education and how that really shaped the way that you view the world and kind of put things together.
Man, it blows my mind to be able to speak about it within a lived experience, right? And I was talking about it yesterday with Blessing. So basically, Cincinnati became this Montessori hub for North America, where and I'm just learning about the university, but the University of Xavier University. Xavier University, not the New Orleans one, the Cincinnati ones, the Jesuit University, started a Montessori program in the 60s, 66 or something, if I'm not mistaken. But it landed, like Montessori landed here around in the mid 60s. And they advocated, the Montessori teachers and administrators advocated for our public school to offer this as a public thing, because it was private, or go to kindergarten. But in Italy, where it was from, Maria Montessori, they wanted it to go all the way to throughout your higher education. But let me take a step back. Montessori is a learning principle technique from Italy. A young lady named Maria Montessori started it, and it uses, first of all, it really wants to be adaptable to every student in the way that they learn. And I love their real life perspective. So if we're learning about outdoors, our ass is outdoors. We're not about to be in the book about that. We have cycles. We have 4 cycles, kind of like people would have semesters or whatnot. And at each of every one, we take a trip, right? There's a lot of Buddhist principles in Montessori. Grounding is a big thing. When we went into class, I'll never forget this. We had to be quiet in the beginning of our class, and we had to be quiet at the end. And they talked about how they were transition periods and need to be, you need to fill the day before you started. And our teachers would observe us. They would write in their own personal teacher journal. And you know how much they were able to identify about each kid doing that? The one kid who's in the back that can't stop moving in that morning, but that's not like him from the usual mornings. Or the one sister who is, quite quiet and meek. They writing in the journal about that before they even start the day. And then maybe even looking back over that journal for a month, or if anything else comes up in that school. And so Montessori uses, in math, we use beads, or we actually make our instruments that we want to then do our math on or whatnot. I remember us vividly having a greenhouse in our class and having a incubator, and we actually built out an environment in our class out of a Palico, old school Palico board, because we were really into recycle and reuse in the early 90s. And it was a bunch of, you can imagine now, it was a bunch of hippies essentially teaching us, but they all with they got their certificates, and we would call them by their first names. And it was just wow, but it was a bunch of hood kids too, because what happened is that Cincinnati offered it up and started, because they had this just great support from Xavier University that was donating money. And so they opened it up as a school that anybody could go to. So my mother and one of her younger sisters, they were pregnant at the same time. So they were like, look, we're hearing about these new schools called Montessori, and they got them in the hood. They actually placed them as the hood school. So it wasn't really much, you know what I'm saying? You just going to school, you randomly was going to a Montessori school. And there was a network around the city, and we went all the way to the 8th grade, but the 8th grade, they had actually started a high school, one of the nation's first public school, high school Montessoris. And we chose to go to the Catholic school to play sports. But I just was blown away by the program. We made passports. So instead of just studying your locations in the world, let's give the kids some incentive. When they learn the language and the currency and all this, they get a stamp in their passport that they made. Come on, that turned me out. And then they brought in their passports, the teachers. So man, come on, that just turned me out. I was like, I gotta get the pass. I was the first in my family to have a passport, at the age of 19. And so, Montessori shaped me. Steven Spielberg, P. Diddy, Martha Stewart, so many people went to it, and it just broke it didn't have to be Western. When people always prophesize on the memes now, question everything. This way of living was question. We had peer mediation. So it was a student, if we beefing, then a student actually got to come in, or is allowed to come in, that we select, that we give permission to mediate us. And it's not always the teacher. Ain't that similar to what we looking at with the police?
Yeah.
And it's really, Montessori really comes from these grounding principles that I feel are very Eastern, to my knowledge. And so it has shaped how I see the world. So it has created, that mindset of HoodCentury. When I was telling you about this Montessori, people like, yo, it's, what an innovative idea. And I'm like, man, like, for Montessori, we look at problem solving easily, and we take it like step by step, and then we kind of weave it. So it, like, some of these things, and I really love Buckminster Fuller because of how he sees the world in this same shit. It's like, yo, it's a system, and then you got checklists. And so HoodCentury was like, all right, we're having housing issues, and people are on Instagram all day, and I started to see, when you're feeling bad and your friend comes over and rubs you in that feeling bad rub. It's like, nigga, like, that made me feel worse. Like, that's what I feel like the language in a lot of these industries are.
Double tap on that.
I'm gonna say that again. So basically, like, that feeling bad rub, where like, is the language is like, my friend feels bad, and my language, my learned behavior is to soothe them and rub them in a way that may, whatever. But to me, that always kind of like, it spiked me, like, and so, but my equation, my sort of metaphor to that is that's the way I feel like housing, or because like people don't say housing, right? Like, but then when you go to talk about housing, you like using housing, like, niggas don't call their home housing. I feel like the language and the way that we talk about certain things, are connected to this sort of way that we've learned to talk about them, instead of the ways that work vibrationally. So, and so me and you talked about, and I feel like the Montessori has guided the one-to-one of how I look at problem solving, right? So like, I see a language issue in this. Like, I see a language issue in how we're talking about space, how we're talking, like, space is private. You ain't telling nobody how much your rent is. Like, so then it's hard for y'all to have dialogue about how you might be being gouged, or how you might be struggling, or right. So let's isolate that away from other issues that may be in housing real quick, and talk about soothing this.
Yeah. It's the way in which the abstracting of one's lived experience in the act of hopefully solving for it actually perpetuates the negative that you're trying to address, right? So if we're talking about, so the way, like, a person's hand touching your back in a way to soothe actually reifies and then surfaces the pain.
For some, yeah. For me, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, but like, so you talked about like these passports, and obviously, you mentioned, Hood Mid-Century kind of getting its kickoff in 2019, but I also know that you weren't born 3 years ago. So what is this path, right? You were working in music. You're working in music, working with Young Guru, who is the DJ of like Jay-Z. But like, this education sparked this desire to see the world, and that led you into music. What was this transition, right? Like, you're a Black kid coming out of Montessori, and you go to this private Catholic high school, and then what? Like,
yeah, man, I know it's crazy, because I basically go to university here in Cincinnati, a small university. I just found out Nick Giovanni used to teach here. They're called Mount St. Joseph. 4-year. My grades were horrible to get into college. I play sport. I'm really a sports kid, right? Like,
what sport?
Football, basketball, track. I love. And then tennis and swimming, and I've just been swimming. I love like surfing and like sort of the connection to water. But and as a youth, I was football, basketball, and ran track a little, you know, in high school. And then in 1 year in college, I played football, but my grades was suey. They were bad. They were horrible. I just a standardized test in me is not. It's too many options. They got 3 options. I'm thinking, nah, man, it's like I couldn't do it, man. And I was actually from I can't skip this. When I was 9 years old, I was actually not hearing out of my left ear. I was told that I wasn't hearing out of my left ear, and had to go to therapy, speech therapy, and then also had to take like every class that I took. I had to have a tutor since I was like 9 years old, all the way through undergrad.
Wow.
I had to have a tutor because essentially I'm left back. So I'm like starting when I was 9 or 10, all the stuff I should have been hearing and all that. And that was a struggle for me. So school was like tough, you know? And like in college, I was just not doing shit, you know? 2 years, I was like, oh, what am I supposed to do here, you know? I wanted to play football. I wasn't eligible. And in my sophomore, junior year, in communications class, this changed my life. I found out about this guy named Molefi Asante. And Molefi Asante is a brother who coined the phrase Afrocentricity. And I learned that by a common or a Talib Kweli quote of a rhyme that they were, you know, a lyric. And when I went into my class, when they had, we during our essays for the year, you had to pick it earlier than throughout the year, you know, and they want to give me St. Augustine. And I ended up finding out that St. Augustine was kind of dope, but like, yo, I told the teacher, I protested, and then she was like, yo, find somebody. And I found Molefi Asante, who had coined this theory. And when I learned about theory coining, and I already had the rhythm of hip hop, and I heard about it from hip hop, it really sort of started to throw my mind into this language, into this crazy field. But essentially what I did was I started to make sure, because I always like communication, I started to make sure that I could be expansive in the way that I communicate. And traveling became a part of like how I saw that when I would talk to, you know, this was when you go to New York and people from Queens and the people from Harlem spoke and dressed different.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is during that era when St. Louis had its own individual style and the way it talked. And so I became actually, to quite be honest, I became obsessed with the New York accent, the New Orleans accent, the Parisian American accent when I would talk to my friends in the early 2000s, man. And I would be like, man, where you from? And what's the origin of why? You know, I was just so geeked up off of these accents and these cultures. When I would go to Brooklyn, and then people would, you know, I'd be like, how you Indian, but you say you from the islands? Like, come here, we gotta talk. Like, and that basic ass like curiosity, bruh, like really started to have me traveling essentially, right? And and I'm a master manifester. Essentially at my year 8, I started manifesting as a kid. Swear down, I just did some healing work and figured that at age 8 is like far as back I could trace me intentionally manifesting. Right? So by the time I'm in college, I find out communication is my thing, but I'm not knowing. So I'll take every type of communication internship. I went to record label, Virgin Records in New York, in the PR department. I'm here in Cincinnati at the news place doing the investigational reporting team, and, you know, where I'm transcribing. I'm in all of the internships around communication publishing. And then I realized, like, Jerald, you communicate things. And so I started going through sales and throwing parties, you know, and I got to this place where I started to book talent and manage talent. Because essentially I ran into a young Michael B. Jordan, and I ran into a young Kevin Hart. And so Kevin and my brother were cool, went to dinner, And my brother was like, if you into sneakers, you need to holler at my brother. Because at the time I had a sneaker shop. Because when I came out of college, I just went to the entrepreneurship. I got a thing about me. I ain't about to be working for no white folk. Knock on all of the wood in the house. So I'm never D. I got to get this out the way. I never had a job. I couldn't, it didn't, once I learned about what they was doing and what they had done to us, morally, I felt like it could be compromising to my spirit. So straight out of school, I was throwing parties and just trying to figure out, and I had a job for 6 months. I did, at a radio station. And I basically started to like, my brother, hey, Kevin, my brother into shoes. Kevin called me. Yeah, I need some shoes for the good. And I'm like, Kevin, I'll be booking. I'll be doing this. He's like, all right, well, book my after parties. So I started booking Kevin Hart's after party. This is about a year or two after Soul playing. So this is kind of an interesting place for Kevin. We don't know if he's going to be, a has-been or what, right? But I saw some amazing things in him as I traveled throughout the 3 or 4 years with Kevin and his team booking after parties. That was kind of like lucrative way to get money at that time when you had it. And then I met a young Michael B. Jordan, one of my best friends, their best friend. They're like, they met each other and they're best friends, so they were roommates. And 2008, my first time out to LA as an adult. And Michael rolls up to Michael and my whole girl Jennifer rolled up to the airport with one roll. And we just drive around LA because Jennifer told him, this is my boy. He loved to see the city. And I was thinking to myself now, like, damn, I was like that in 2008. But she was like, bro, we literally drove around LA for 3 hours. They said we're gonna drive to almost to the end of the tank. Because they just drove, they did the In and Out, they did the hot this, and they went up to Cosby House, they went here, and they smoking me out. And those were like a really big moments for me, both with Kevin and Michael. And so they allowed me both to start booking and working with them. Mostly with Michael with branding and understanding around his image. And then Kevin was the booking. And so I found myself in the crosshairs of like, and this is just like a 22, 23-year-old kid who's like just trying to travel essentially. Like, I'm just trying to get around the world. And so Kevin ended up meeting me to Snoop's team. And I remember one of my first trips internationally for work was going to Aarhus, Denmark. And just kind of like, it's just like, this is crazy. And I go for a Snoop Dogg concert because I had booked the after party. And I told the promoter that I must come out there to organize, to make sure that. So he books me the flight. And I'm in this, like, it's crazy because before I was just booking from home, just trying to travel, trying to get it. But this time it was real. And Snoop embraced me and DJ LT embraced me like the fam, the weed, and had me on stage. And it really kind of, not only the compassion of Snoop and his team, but being international and seeing Danish design in person and seeing that there was something different about the purses and the gear that the young ladies was wearing, it really turned me on to travel. And I mean, we like 3 or 4 passports later, I just became obsessed with new realities and different realities.
And kind of thinking about, different realities and the actual reality, right? Like the actual reality that we live in and grow up in, and, really not understanding kind of what we find ourselves in, like how does Hood Mid-Century Modern allow us to see better?
Yeah. It's just, it's quite profound because everybody, I know you probably do this, where like you do the test on yourself and then boom, if it worked for you, it's gonna work for the next man. You know, until they tell you different, right? And so once I had that moment walking up the street, I basically started to open its eyes to me. So I was like, oh, the apartment building is too oh, this is without formal learning. I just open my energy up to receiving it, right? And a lot of us kind of do that. We just don't know that that's what we're doing. So I open myself up to seeing it, you know? And I just really believe that seeing makes you an active participant right away, right? Right. Then from there, there's science that could take us there, right? Everything that happens after you're an active participant is damn near judicial, you know what I mean? And so when we see, I always tell people that there is an infinite amount of things that can happen out of that, right? So because a lot of times when I'm applying for grants or I'm talking to partners, they want to quantify after you see it. Can we get them to go shop? Can we get them to go? And what I'm saying is that it's from an energetic standpoint and from a realistic standpoint. I want to know what you think about this. Once somebody sees something, there's no studies that we've done yet of what could happen in any of these categories, right? So once you see that anything that you saw in your life, you can go a multiple, but at least you have now an opportunity to choose those things or be pulled by that energy from sight that Shai has showed you. But I don't think it's quite quantifying what's possible because it's just so, that's kind of like sexuality. It's so fluid once you get inspired where that inspiration is going to take you. What do you think about that?
Like, give me an example of the way in which seeing something, you know, opens up an infinite point of possibility.
So basically right now on my account, everybody I talk to say, hey, cool, when you showed me that building on my corner, on this corner that I have never been to or whatever, it opened my mind up. But then what I'm saying, D, is then that opening of the mind will allow that maybe that person's a nurse. And maybe that opening of the mind in this building that did that may allow for a new cure to, you know, I don't know. It's like it becomes infinite because of the professionals that are on my account and the amateurs that are on my account and the loved one that I've opened their mind to their neighborhood. But that doesn't always mean that they're going to engage directly in their neighborhood. Maybe they're going to engage in another neighborhood, or maybe when they go on vacation, they're going to open that site up. And what I'm saying is that the power of seeing is actually infinite. Does that make sense? Or that's what I believe.
Yeah, okay. So I think what you're speaking about is the ways in which by allowing someone to recognize their environment or the objects or spaces around them, by offering a new lens, what you create is a paradigmatic shift, right? So their schema actually shifts. And by schema, you know, for people who are listening, to think about a schema means like if you're looking around your room right now, right, you can consider that like a schema, right? The table goes here, the couch goes there, the plant goes there, everything has its place. It's all set up. That is a schema, which comes from like a theme, right? And by you introducing and or even naming a thing that was kind of always there, but maybe not recognized or seen, in order to, or I should just say even a new idea, right? So if you take the room as your mind and I bring in a new table, then that means that everything in that room now has to shift in order to make room for it. And in that shifting, it opens up new possibilities. But it's not necessarily saying that the intention is that you are just making room for the table, because maybe when you move the couch, you see something else. And that leads you down a whole other path of discovery. And so it is just in the introduction of new information that opens up other pathways of being, because life is intimate and is infinite. And to circle back to what you were speaking about, kind of like the spiritual opening, right, or the co-creation of reality, is that, right? Like once you recognize that you are an active participant in your seeing, then you realize that you actually can then shift and control what you pay attention to, because it's about attention. It's about vibration. It's like, you can't hear what's being broadcast on 107.7 if you're tuned to 98.6. But that doesn't mean that 107.7 does not exist. It means that that's just not where you're tuned to. But all of those waves are happening at the same time, and they are infinitely indivisible. And so what does it mean to introduce someone to the frequency of 107.7 when they've been operating at 98.6? And what does that open up for them? Like, what does that allow for? Because by discovering that there's a 107.7, then you're like, wait, is there a 110.4? And so then
right, or somebody's mind might be like, there is, and they go this way, right? Because
and that's the other side of it, and that's what most people do, because in order to be introduced to a new idea, that means that everything else has to shift. And most people, and when I say most people, I include myself, are comfortable in things staying the way that they are, right? And so, you spoke about sexuality. What does it mean if I have identified myself and I've aligned myself as a heterosexual male, right? But then I go to a party and I have this dope connection with another guy, and it's a little bit more than friendship, and I unconsciously am attracted to him. It's actually the fear of what that could open up that causes people to actually shut down, right? Because actually, I feel more comfortable with everything remaining the same. And it's much easier to actually reject the thing, because to accept it means that everything else shifts. And so for an example, for me, my father's a pastor. I grew up in a Baptist tradition, was told that the Bible, is from God's mouth to the page. But when I was in college, I actually went to a Jesuit school for undergrad. We had to study theology, and we started to speak about the Apocrypha. So for those listening, the Apocrypha are a set of books that exist in the Catholic Bible, that do not exist in the Protestant Bible. And we can talk about Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation and how he removed these books from the Old Testament because they did not match up. We don't need to get into all of that theory. But, me growing up in a Protestant tradition, and the teacher says, turn to Second Maccabees, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I've never heard of that shit. However, right, in order to accept that, it actually meant that everything else had to crumble, right? Everything that I'd been told about God, religion, everything had to crumble in that very moment. But one could also do is just ignore it and say that, oh, those are the hidden books, they are forbidden, and by ignoring them, everything gets to stay the same. However, that also means that your life then stays the same. And so speaking about...
powerful, man. Thank you for that.
Yeah. No worries. So thinking about this power of manifestation, what are your spiritual practices?
Well, I'm so in spirit world, bro. It's crazy. So, I want to talk about these two things, and I would love to continue the conversation with you about this, because I think that that you'll have some really interesting thoughts around this. So there's the spirit. There's this current, I call it after Catholicism happening, right? Where people are now, getting back into native tradition, going back to their ancestry, even if ancestor is tradition. Kind of the homegirls at the Protestant church that grew up so reformed are now de-reforming and but still keep, it's all of this is happening right now. I want to do a documentary called After Catholicism, but my spirit world practice is putting spirit world first and fighting for spirit world to be the world that I live in.
How do you define spirit world?
Spirit world is it's a little, it's it's sort of the creator of this entity, this land or this thing right here, the creator of the infinite universe, and my Aunt Cleone and my dad and everyone that sort of lives in different form or exists in different form, the animal world, all the worlds that share this universe. sort of like that world. You know what I mean? It's law, it's everything from that world. And I also think about the beliefs that I've chosen in the mostly polytheistic beliefs sectors, and just all of that stuff that I consider like my spirit world. So facing south, I sleep south, right? Like I'm in flow energy. If I wake up at 4 o'clock, I'm not beating myself up to go back to sleep. I feel like maybe I need to be up. Something may come to me. Keep a notepad. So like my spirit world, talking with my ancestors, understanding the energy of things. Like I have an archive here, behind me. And I was like for a second, like, I feel like I'm feeling this archive on me. Like, like, and went to go speak to some people. And they're like, yeah, like them pictures and all of that energy that you have and all of those things you have has energy, bro. And so that world, and so the other world that I see Black folks actively, and I don't know if it's passively or I see a lot of intentional decolonization in ourselves, right? Like during this, not only during this sector, but obviously in the 70s, but I see it heavy in our group now. And so decolonization and spirit world for me, or how I'm calling it spirit world, are kind of like the things that I'm kind of in and around and at battle with right now, right? And so the way that we present, if I get so granular with it, that's where we got to start, don't it? From the decolonization program, deprogramming aspect, to even allow spirit world or these sort of, and I don't have the language quite for the spirit world side, but what it is that we really want to get to when we speak in our truth. So when we sharing our art, or when we're sharing our feelings, and that thing that happens when you go out to the white world and you got to kind of tighten your feelings up and tighten out your art up. And then your spirit world, you gushing with gratitude and happiness because you actually get to say it, for real on this side. And so I'm actively, and a lot of my practice has been aggressively tearing down the decolonization, like going hard at it, right? So I'm not shaking your hand like this, right? The up and down, for the listeners, the up and down white man's handshake. That's not native to me, bro. Like that don't got nothing to do with me, bro. Like, that has nothing to do with me. Like, why am I being forced to do that? Like that's been for about a decade, D. There's these smallest things that we do that are so colonized. My homegirl from Nigeria is here, blessing. She's unbelievable and unbelievable connected to source. When I ask her which way, east, south, or north, or west, she don't know. We don't know where we at, bruh. Like me and you talked about this. We have no idea where we're located right now. And that is just so interesting to me, especially for the grounded folks. We just can't make out how the West can benefit us, how going south or sleeping that way, or understanding the sort of like the cosmos, even the scientific part that you can't kind of argue that actually feeds into a lot of our spirit world practice. We real light at that, but we know Ecclesiastes chapter this and and so, and it's all good because I think I'm there too. Like it's a practice, but I'm choosing spirit world, and things have like, I work with Young Guru. Let's go back on that. Young Guru is Jay-Z's audio engineer and DJ. So he's the vibration. He's the head of the vibration for one, if not the most influential person of our generation to our generation. And so in learning that, I had to go on a series of understanding and learning about sound and vibrational energy. And so that was a big part of my life, my last 10 years, man. I worked with Guru for 10 years and almost 10 years straight. Like I worked with other artists and found some other artists, but he was my steady guy where he didn't need too much, but I was so excited about creating with him. And this is where I did a lot of my life's work, and it's really around vibrational energy. Me learning vibrational energy through Guru and sound then helped me propel to the places that I feel like I'm at right now.
And in what ways, like, being in the world of hip hop, how has that, what is the relationship between hip hop and architecture?
Man, that's crazy. It's so funny. Shouts out to hip hop. First of all, 49 years old yesterday, August 11th. Oh, sorry. I'm going to say that in case anytime I bring it up. But anyway, August 11th, 49 years old, born from a Jamaican immigrant, right? Now, I'm gonna say this is going to be cold because I guess a couple of the brothers that talk about the correlation of hip hop might do this or might have hip hop architecture. So basically, there's a Caribbean brother. He comes up here like all the Caribbeans came here in the UK to work, and his parents would work, and they moved to the hood, and they moved to government housing. And 1520 Cedric Avenue is a public housing. That's where hip hop started, and it started from a Jamaican or a toast tradition of using vibrational energy, sound, wiring it themselves, right? This like technician or this engineering, rewiring, wiring, and then remixing and mixing. It came from that culture. And so hip hop and architecture and essentially the New Deal are synonymous with each other. Like, I mean, that's where I was started. Even though I look at then, I think I could go deeper in vernacular, I could go like to like, making like, I think like connections to our struggle, the vernacular of our struggle essentially started in the projects. It became the stage, right? It became the like thing that we trying to, run from and get away from and do better for, which I think is really quite interesting that our inspiration of our surroundings. I got a Graham grant last year, and it was interesting because, and it's gonna be a slight segue, but you know exactly where I'm going because I'm gonna go there to come back to how our environments influence us, and our knowledge of knowledge of that influence being so having this dearth. So basically, when on the Underground Railroad, the self-emancipators were looking for design, weren't they? They were looking for homes. They were being told architectural features, D. They were being told very detailed features from a vernacular standpoint, usually. Red tile ceiling. They were being told like planning. When you get to the creek and the city planning wrapped around these creeks, or when you get here, you gotta do this, that. I thought that was brilliant. And the way that they would be able to like sort of like that sort of thought being that they were kind of knowing houses and understanding roles and understanding how the city worked, which the natives generations before had created mostly. When I look at Black folks, there's that same thing where we describe our hoods and we're being described, or we're being descriptive. It's the same thing opposite. We're describing our hoods all day, right? Hip hop is the biggest. If HUD really wanted to do some knowledge, they would go to hip hop albums and for research on how, this last 20, 50 years, right? And so this language and housing, it's like, I just think it's so connected that people, and one of the things that angered me in that statement that I just made is that, and this is like, I want to be the Tupac of design. I told you this. A lot of us are using the theoretical and the practice model of these Western colleges who have actually been quite a part of the problem, and not from an unbalanced standpoint, D. Just kind of like if I'm looking at it neutrally, Columbia has been part of the problem, right? But then their school and their practice is almost theoretical, right? They're implementing them and being cool with legislators around housing and sort of like wrapping all of this great knowledge around our country. All of these institutions has chose to keep these great, great, great books and texts and studies as institutional and as part of their practice and their endowment. And I just think that that's not only disgusting, that's kind of weird. It's kind of like odd. But then the Black brothers and sisters who also have utilized the esteem of these universities, including myself, then all of a sudden we become like their standard is now our standard, and essentially we start to get ready to do the same shit. And you notice I said we start to get ready because we ain't doing what them white folk doing. I'm just, keeping it a buck for could we? And exactly, one of the things about equality is weird. It's like this shit started over here. How we equal to the art? But like, that's neither here nor there. It's like, I think that I know that there's different paths. Like hip hop actually is a learning. And so I've started to survey hip hop. Like when was the first time a hip hop architect, the first time a person mentioned an architect by name in hip hop, Jay-Z, when he mentioned Zaha Hadid. The crib looked like Zaha Hadid did it. Ha, he different. 2020 on Jay Electronica's joint. And the reason why I call hip hop, sometimes people think like, oh, you call hip hop because you like it. It is right now the most influential culture in the world. It won't be forever, and it hasn't always been. But right now it is. Why are we not studying its guts? Any other culture that was this big, you would be studying, it'd be studies out the wazoo. And I think a lot of that has to do with us. Like, why are we not studying it? Because it's affecting us the most. And design is all up in it, man. We can find out how people felt about their houses. We can find out the how to speak about housing because they do it so well, right? Or speak about emotions, or speak about it. We could take, instead of like always kind of like metaphoric, I love like the imaginative world and 3D. I love that stuff. I feel like sometimes I even exist in it. But being there allows me a little bit more clarity to solve some of these, I don't think, quite complex issues when you at least have a tool like the most influential culture. Like, what is everybody? Well, everybody huddle up. Like, this thing got it off. We gotta give it to it. Like, what is it about that? And so I know that I put a bunch of things just right there, but that's just how I'm feeling right now,
Yeah, and you even mentioned, this kind of anniversary of hip hop, and the ways in which design has directly influenced it, but us not having a vocabulary around it. So there's an architect, Sekou Cook, who also will have a podcast episode coming up, who has created a book called Hip Hop Architecture, and the ways in which he originally said that Robert Moses is actually the father of hip hop. Robert Moses is a kind of a totalitarian wielder of power in the not in the United States, but in New York City, that put highways in the middle of Black neighborhoods, and did multiple things, but essentially helped create the conditions that actually then birthed hip hop. But like those very spaces, these housing projects that were a part of the New Deal and American, like this kind of swath of public housing that came out of legislation in the 1940s and 50s, were very much based on the kind of theory and notions of like Le Corbusier, right? And his Ville Radieuse, or like the Radiant City, and the ways in which those systematically did not incorporate Black life, but Black life was forced within them, and then we see like the results of it. For instance, on episode 2, if you're listening, you can hear architect Mabel Wilson and I speak about Pruitt-Igoe and the Pruitt-Igoe housing in St. Louis, Missouri, but also the ways in which hip hop itself is a design framework. So it's a subversion of design, right? So in actually doing the thing that you're not supposed to do to a record, which is to touch it. And then as design is predictive, meaning that it is designed in order for the user to interact with it in a very specific way, it is actually the refusal of that, where you're actually taking the record and moving it the other way, which then actually creates a scratch. And it is in the refusal of predictive design that actually births hip hop, but then also in the building of hip hop, right, which is really an archival process of generating loops and history and like crate digging that is then rearranged in a way, in an architecture vernacular, you would call it adaptive reuse, which is taking an existing structure and rethinking it and building upon it. And so, in that way, hip hop is architecture. It is a built environment, one that is both a part of a oral tradition in the Black community, but then also speaks about time and place. But I want to circle back really quickly on, young Guru and him being this kind of vibrational technologist. We spoke a lot earlier in the previous conversation about the ways in which producers are actually like the technologists of the hood.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I did this this thought that, and I know, I mean, the listeners and you, if we just do this sort of study where you like go back in your mind, like who were the homies in my high school, my junior high school that had a propensity for technology, like the homeboys mostly. And if we, ladies who ain't dissing you, but the fellas, like it's kind of like something was happening during this hip hop time, mid 70s on, where we were bringing the guys who knew who the DJs and the producers had the most technical capacity in the hood. It's like, and like, just like this is the first time I've ever said it out loud on a podcast. So thank you for letting me say that, because it seems quite profound in a couple simple ways. Around 2008, there was a cry for us to know that, when a lot of the companies, 2008, 2010, let's say it's 2010, we go through this like economic downfall of 2008, and all the Black leaders said we need to, and the numbers for Black men just going to jail, crazy, dying, and getting a job in technology was not one of them, but technology was this new sector. In 2008, it's by 10, Google comes out with this, Google and all of the technology companies coming out with all these grants and all this money. You remember that? That's where Black Girls Code was born. That's what and I'm like, are y'all crazy? And even to this day, because I kind of like got busy, nobody has said that brothers actually have been down in their mama's basement for 20 hours trying to get this damn beat to Kanye. Even Kanye actually tells interviews. Sid, the producer, tells interviews. J. Cole tells interviews. Frank Ocean tells interviews. Steve Lacy has said, I was downstairs in the basement working via technology to get my creation. Steve Lacy made his first album on his telephone. How are we not going to this as a gateway? And so in 2000, and so I started working with Georgia Tech University in 2013, I want to say, because I started to feel that I needed to be a part of this. Again, I'm really solution based, so I'm like, let's go to curriculum, right? So I went down to Georgia Tech University, #1 music and technology program in the world, and so we started working with them for over 7 years, developing curriculum, lecturing, and our lectures were and I wish I was still on this path, because our lectures were books. They were little like because that's what they were intended to do for Georgia Tech. They were actually like, yo, lecture 5 times a year so we can get all of this shit we need to get from Guru, who was like really thinking about physics and the connection to physics, and all of the great physicists, and a lot of the great contemporary ones Guru was just enamored with, Jerald and all of these massive minds around vibrational energy. And if you look at a lot of these hip hoppers that, again, are producers, they're quite into like a lot of that stuff. Timberlands and Swiss, they understand and Kanye, like they understand vibrational energy different, and they're the technologists of our time. And we still to this day, to the recording of this thing, of this episode, we still haven't seen that a lot of our Black brothers go to technology like they go to the basketball courts to get out of the hood. And if we could only be there with transferable skill set opportunities for them. Like if you like doing this, you might definitely like doing this computer technology, because this could basically, we're not there for them right now. There's a shouts out to the Elements program here in Cincinnati, and there's a couple of programs in New York that are taking initiatives to creating almost YouTube-like labs, and as community centers, which was one of I did a proposal for a study, and I'm about to get this study through. You hear what I'm saying? Because now that I'm independent and I'm my own brother, this is part of who I want to be. So it's been it's so new, D, that I'm like me and as an individual, and not like doing this study like halftime while managing these great people. Is like now I actually just get to like, let me actually do that study. I got a grant fundraiser, and we just thinking about strategies for the year and what I can get out. So it's very new, but I can't wait to get back to that study, because I really feel like it could be a flip for a generation, man.
Yeah. And so what is the vision, right? Like we speak about, creating a lexicon and a language and an understanding to help, people see. And, we've spoken about, hip hop as a way to really access, and study a type of technology. And, I know HoodCentury just started a couple of years ago, Hood Mid-Century Modern. And so what is the vision?
The vision. I mean? Yep.
Where you headed?
All right. So imagine this. I'm in this space right now. It's 8,000 square feet. I'm in the West End of Cincinnati. All right, boom. I'm gonna land it back home. I'm creating this space and this intentionality umbrella of this thing I'm calling it Things We've Made. And Things We've Made are gonna house a HoodCentury, right? They're gonna house that archival energy, which is one of my next projects, where it's a creative studio and strategy around archiving. Mostly for Black folks. Not all, but mostly for Black folks, right? Where we're gonna, archive need agency, right? Right? They, the shouts out to the Smithsonian and the African American Museum, but when those things at the African American Museum really make sense is when they're in movies, when they're on commercials, when they're in our lifestyle and where we're at, not just at the museum. And so I'm gonna do that. I got this project called That Feeling, right? And it's the World Star Hip Hop healing for Black folk, right? We got a whole nother thing going on with Black folk. We be like, we be saying stuff like, I ain't gonna say that, I don't wanna jinx it. We be saying stuff like, don't go through that. We be doing like, don't go through that pole, don't go to that side. We have a whole nother thing going on, and there's not a mechanism of media to help us out with that or to have that language. And so I'm setting up these Things We've Made to tackle these massive issues, but just with little perspectives. Like HoodCentury doesn't, once HoodCentury started, I don't know if you saw it, like, and HoodCentury is a part of, not disconnected to, a massive conversation that's going on right now with architecture, with everybody, not just Black folk, right? It's a part of, and that feeling is going to be a part of, and that archival energy is going to be a part of this bigger thing of, I feel like I'm probably about to choose around 5 or 6 things right now. I have about 4 of them figured out that are a massive problem. Food. I got a farm in Kentucky right now, 100 acres, because like we're gonna attack that. But when we talking about food, when you talk about Black folk, sometimes you got to talk about how you gonna look or how it's gonna make you feel instead of the nutritional values and and the calling it a vegan and all that. Sometimes you might be like, this is gonna make you glow, eat this. Right? It's sometimes different for us. And so a lot of my projects are gonna just be tackling these things, but ultimately I'm working through language and I'm working through research. So at the core of Things We've Made, we're gonna be researching. So hopefully I'm going to find a research home in the next couple of years. It's going to be a part of these institutions some of these institutions that I've mentioned. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to have them sitting my stuff there and working on my stuff. And we best believe it's going to belong to us. But I'm looking to I want to launch a research, like a real contemporary African. And I say African-American because it seems like I no longer have to say that because I'm at the core, we're at the core of all we're doing, but I want there to be a younger research entity that is kind of spitting out some things from our side. So that's my big 5-year plan. And then on the media side, I want to help build and create some very simple, very, very simple things that will help us in all of these massive categories that we're facing in the media. Ted Turner is randomly from Cincinnati, and although he's a little wacky, a little racist or whatever, the model that he created of media and how he understood and studied mass media is been quite interesting to me. And so I hopefully I'll start and support some great media channels like HoodCentury that's going to be made. And then I think I want to be an artist. I want to be liberated from those two things that I set out that I'm doing. I want to be liberated from the day. I want to be free to create. So you're going to see that in music and films and writing. You've already seen it be aesthetic. I just want to be an artist. I just told myself that, man, you could paint. You could be a painter, bro. You could, hey, shouts out to Hank Willis Thomas and all the great Simone, all the great artists who follow the account, Wells Bonner, and all of the great minds that follow the account, because as I look at their pages and look at their processes, I'm encouraged to learn and be silent with more of my creation in order to just do it. So I hope that I could be doing that as well. That feels like what's next.
Yeah. What's the biggest threat to that vision?
It's really me and the non-discipline. I moved to Cincinnati because I wanted to be part of why I moved to Cincinnati. I wanted to allow myself more space, to get things done. And so I think the biggest threat to that vision is allowing other things to create this undisciplined Jerald Cooper. I think the more disciplined I am, the more I can get those things done. The universe is bending at my thoughts, right? The source energy is coming in now with no blocks of horns in New York or women in LA or weed in LA. It's just and I'll be in LA, you know what I mean? And I'll be in New York, but there's this calm to what I'm seeing right now. And listen, some of the things that I've been throughout the podcast, when we listen back to them, they're all mad simple. But some of them are quite ground level to us, even doing us collectively as African Americans helping Black men in technology. We have to understand where they're at, right? That's foundational. I hope to be a foundation. I love Buckminster. I think that I'm exhibiting some of this Buckminster energy when it comes to simplicity of what we need. How are we going to talk about gentrification in our neighborhood when our language for talking about our space is not even developing. Nobody's kind of jostling with it during the day with us, What you call that hangover thing, the hang over the roof, right? All the architects are busy. All architects are architecting. We need somebody to come here and be like, yo, that's cantilever, that's this, or that, And so I can't wait for that side of this. I'm gonna be in every on what you call this? You call this of the imagination.
The Institute of Black Imagination.
On the Institute of Black Imagination, you better hear it here first. I'm gonna be everywhere in y'all gift shops when y'all looking for architecture and Black folks. Since y'all ain't want to do it first, I'm gonna be the one. And I would love to work with y'all. And I would love to y'all work with me. I work with y'all, but how is there the gift shops? The very places where some of us end up, and all the places where we are, we don't see architecture and Black folk at all. No postcard, no calendar, nothing. Noma, where y'all at, bro? This getting ridiculous, bro. Noma, bro, I got all kind of I call it beef with Noma, man. Where's y'all at? One of my things about the spaces, and when I see some of the like danger and like some of the spaces, I'll be counting and looking at who all there and what they wearing. Like you ain't come for no scuffle. You look like you part of this. So when I came into architecture, I'm like, what is y'all doing, bro? Like, there's so many basic things that we can be doing. Ain't none of y'all call out that Issa house, that's all mid-century. Like, y'all ain't call out that Jay-Z said Zaha's name in hip-hop. Like, where y'all at, bro? Like, where's everybody at, bro? Like, and I feel like everybody is in Milan. Like, everybody is And I just came from Milan, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like everybody trying to, and shouts out to, I don't got no hate for nobody. I just feel like I want to be one of the people to come in and say it. And I'm a little nervous about it because I'm from the natty. It get weird when we start to feel like, when people spinning you, like, why are we not pointing out simple things to our brothers and sisters in their language already? So I'm going to go into every little industry. Like, shouts out to the dude who created Amazon. I'm going to go into every little industry and and if you dizzy when I spin you around, you might fall. All the publishers, Amazon came in and bullied. One of the things I must say before I get out of here is that the Everything Store, that book came out in 2015. It's one of my favorite creative business books of all time. And it basically profiled the creation and the now of Amazon. And I thought in 2015, and I still think now, that what Jeff did to the whole industry and world is hilarious. And it's just brilliant. It's so simple, right? Like, it was just so, from his origins and his sort of his knowledge of the internet. Because, a lot of people debate some of their problems once they see it being final in the universe. But some people just get to it. Some people are like, yo, it's gonna happen. And from the way that he kind of took in the era, and I work with engineers, the way that he took in all of these industries once he knew that everything was about to go digital is something that I've never seen. And I don't think maybe I know we'll see it again, but wow, you could just follow it up, right? Like, you could see him gobbling up and the book, the Everything Store, it's a really good read. And I think ethically what he does is like bullshit. I mean, it's that of a white man, excuse my French, but the creativity in which he looked at the world and like what we need and the convenience, and he studied us. He studied our behaviors online. It's quite brilliant. And I think the same, I must say the same way about the way that the Russians took our election. I don't like emotionally, we can look at it all day and let it spike our anxieties. But if you break it down, it was quite like it worked and it was quite genius. It was very simple. It had to do with our everyday, our everyday online interaction. Jeff did that, and then Putin did that. And I think that I want to do aspects of like, how are we existing in our everyday? And then how can I harness that to then create healing? And vibrationally it aligns, right? I'm taking a vibration and showing it back to the same person who was created. So vibrationally it aligns. And now I just have to sort of like create enough of the foundation or the system to support that interaction.
Yeah, man, this is such a good conversation. It sucks that we have to like kind of wind it down here for a second. Obviously, we're going to have you back because I feel like we are actually witnessing the beginning of something pretty amazing. And before I ask my last question, I just want to like acknowledge you for following your desire, right? We had a conversation earlier about like how sometimes that shit is just basic. It's like, I'm going to this school because there's a cute girl there. And you don't realize that on the other side of that is actually who you are to become. And so I think it's so important for people to remain open, and stay curious about the world. And obviously your parents kind of set that up. And then there are people outside of your parents, right? Like who brought this Montessori school to the hood that allowed you to really approach the world through this lens of curiosity. And in that process have, created and filled a void, right? So the courage to actually go into the thing. And I think you see, right, the resonance, right? Like what actually comes back by making that choice to choose yourself and to just choose your desire, right? Outside of even prescribing to a traditional education system, performance, right, in that educational system. And then that process of constantly like forgiving yourself and working on yourself to be the person and to become the person to like bring this vision forth. So I just want to acknowledge like that work, that ongoing.
Thank you so much, bro. Thank you so much for that, man. I really appreciate it.
Of course. So if you had everything at your behest, what is the world you imagine for the future?
Wow, the world that I imagine for the future if I had everything. Wow, there seems to be like an individual part of that, and there seems to be like everybody else part of that, you know? Because this world as it exists now, in this big experiment, it's like, you know, it's pretty out of control, you know? And so, you know, it almost seems fitting to let, like, you know, nature be nature, you know, right? Like, the lion is going to do this, the hyena is going to do this. And so I almost, appreciate or having be grateful that I get to live in this time to see, you know, a destruction of such a beautiful planet. On one side, you got a beautiful planet that's being destroyed, but on the other side, I think energetically, there's a massive lesson being learned. So that's one side of the world. I wouldn't change much. On a personal side, let me start researching. Let me make some very complex things very simple. You know, and I feel like I'll be at like the place that I think is. As I'm ready to transition into another form, if I can get researching, and I love, you know, the marketing of hip hop and the promotion of hip hop. I even love the promotion of studies when they get going in a lobbyist group. You know, they'll run you a study, they'll knock you out with a study, and I just think that. Since we haven't been able to do the official study of the effects of transatlantic slavery to Black people, we haven't been able to do these great studies, and then we haven't been able to market and promote these studies at the correct time. When I'm able to do that, and when I'm able to set up this research institution, I think that's going to be like that's when the world to me feels like great and perfect, round. So.
Well, brother, have a beautiful rest of your afternoon. Enjoy that Ohio River view.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sara. I really appreciate you, man. You're so brilliant and you killing it, man. So I can't wait to continue to connect with you. And I'm a big fan and supporter. And obviously like I'm on my third podcast of yours right now. So one episode. So I'm just really intrigued and excited to continue to know you. And CJ over there listening, I appreciate you as well.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. Coop is free. I'll just say that. If you want to see how free, make sure you check out the video of this interview over on our new YouTube channel, the Institute of Black Imagination. Drop us a comment and be sure to share your thoughts over on Instagram and Twitter at Black Imagination. You can also check out this conversation and others at blackimagination.com. The world we live in has been designed, and we must design our way out of it. Stay curious and keep dreaming.